Hey guys, Todd here. Today we're going to install the RVL Fender Flares from Husky liner on the 2021 and up body style Ford F-150. Now if your truck is equipped with factory headlights and taillights, the tools we'll be using are a number 2 Phillips head screwdriver, a ratchet with 8mm socket, a fastener removal tool, Sharpie, scissors, electric impact driver with 8mm socket, wire stripper and crimper tool, and a heat gun. If your truck is equipped with LED headlights and taillights, you'll also need a test light. Now make sure you're subscribed to our channel to stay up to date with our latest content. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and start off by prepping our flares. Now I'm gonna prep this one, all 4 flares prepped pretty much the same way. We've got an LED light to install and also some edge trim. So let's go ahead and start with that LED light. All right, first we're gonna go ahead and put together our light assembly. Now this does not come already installed because if you decided you wanted to paint the fender to match, you wanna be able to install that after the fact. Now I've already got this on here. This is the marker light gasket. It's a simple peel and stick. Just make sure the 3 holes in the gasket line up to the 3 holes in the flare. That'll help keep moisture out of the unit itself. This is your marker light cover. On the top of that, I've also already got this installed. This is a blackout strip that goes right across here. That keeps any kind of light from bleeding out the top whenever it goes on top. That way it only comes out the front. So what we'll be doing is take our marker light and it'll fit into this housing and into the cover where the holes are still gonna line up here. Make sure that your wires go through this center hole. Feed that through. Once you get that fed through, go ahead and flip it over. All right, now you'll notice that the holes in the back side of the flare will line up to the holes in the marker light and the marker light cover. Next, you're gonna take the hardware from your kit. You're gonna have a small stainless steel screw with flat washer. You're gonna use a Phillips head screwdriver. And just go ahead and connect this stuff together. All right, you just want to get nice and snug. Do not over tighten that because you can actually break the threads on the inside. That's all plastic. Next, let's go ahead and start working on the edge trim. Okay, so let me rotate the flare around. This is the edge of the flare that's going to actually touch your fender. So we want to protect your fender. We're going to be doing that with our edge trim. Now you'll notice we've got some vinyl back tape. This right here, that's going to be adhering to the bottom side of our edge. And so we want to make sure it's all the way forward. I've already gone ahead and wiped down this surface in here with rubbing alcohol. You want to make sure and do that before you attach the edge trim. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to peel back a couple inches of that. Make sure that is wrapped around this way because we have to peel that out. And we're going to start fitting the edge trim in place. All right, and then press on it to get a nice adhesion. And then I like to work a few inches at a time, kind of get it going ahead of itself a little bit. All right, so I'm going to work it forward a little bit. Peel that tape and adhere it. Just work it just a little bit at a time all the way back to the other side. Once we get it up to the end, we're going to cut it in place. Okay, now go ahead and repeat the same process for the other 3 flares. Now, one of my favorite parts about these flares is that amber marker light. Now, it can be wired directly into your parking lights, or you can also use it as a turn signal. It does an excellent job of showing other people on the road where you are and what you're doing. Now, first, what I'm going to do is pull out this taillight. The way I'm going to do that is use an 8mm, pull out 2 screws, wiggle that out, and then I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the harness. Okay, now this is the back of our factory housing. This is an LED housing. You might also have a halogen housing. If you had a halogen housing, you would have individual harnesses going to each bulb. And what you would do is pick which bulb, whether it be a marker light or a turn signal that you want to tap into, and then find that harness, and we're going to tap into that harness. I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, now this is obviously not a halogen bulb. I'm just using this as an example to show you how to wire it up. But what you would do is you'd spread apart the harness to get 2 wires. and you might have to split some insulation to get that apart. But what we'll do is we'll take a posi-tap connector, the gray piece you want to unscrew from the connector, and you're going to take that and then slide it over top of the wire. There's a split inside that gray piece, so just slide it in like that. And you're going to take the other part of the posi-tap and then thread it back into the gray piece. What that does is allows the spike on the inside to penetrate down into the through the insulation and into the wire and make connection. Then on this side, what we're going to do is we're going to unscrew that, and that's going to allow us to connect through this side over here. We're going to repeat the same on this one. Okay, so now at this point, they're all set up just like so. All right, next in your kit, you're gonna have some wire that's all rolled up. I've gone ahead and pulled that apart, and I've stripped about 1/4 inch of insulation off of each side. Next, what we're gonna do to wire into this is we're gonna locate which one is positive and which one is ground. You would use a test light to do that, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute. Or if you can also hook up to them, and if it doesn't work, just swap the polarity, because this is going to an LED and it is polarity specific. So let's suppose this one right here is the positive. What we're going to do is take our red wire, run it through this side of our posi-tap connector, push that into the connector to where we're making contact with the wire and the post, and then just screw that together. Once that's screwed together, it's going to be nice and tight and it'll have a good connection. We're going to do the same with our negative. Make sure you give them a nice tug to make sure you have a good connection. Let's go ahead and move on and show you what to do if you have LED. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and walk you through using the test light. What we're going to do is take the test light, I'm going to go underneath the truck, find a ground wire that's going to the frame, and hook up the test light to that, and then turn on the headlights. All right, now I've got the headlights turned on. If I was going to go into a turn signal, I would use the hazard lights, but I'm just going to do the parking lights on this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to start from here and just push the test light into each one of the holes until the light illuminates. All right, there is our pin that we need to tap into. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this over, and that's 3 in. So we're going to count 1, 2, 3 wires over and go ahead and hook up our posi-tap to that connection right there. That is going to be our positive. All right, now we're going to use our test light again to find which wire is the ground. We're going to be using our posi-tap here to do that. What we're going to do is take our test light and go ahead and clamp down onto just a sacrificial piece of wire. And then what we're going to do with that piece of wire is we're just going to push that into our posi-tap. Next, what we're going to do is go through until we find a good connection. So we started on this side for the find the power. The ground is probably on the opposite side. So I'm just going to go in one at a time until I find the ground. All right, and that's going to be our ground. It's going to be a 3rd one in on this side over here. So I'm going to go ahead and wire in our other posi-tap to the 3rd wire here, which is that yellow-black. All right, now let's go ahead and connect our 2 wires and take them into the wheel well. And here's our negative. And our positive. All right, we're going to cut off a piece of this, run it up, and drop it down through the wheel well. All right, there we go. Now I'm going to go ahead and get this wire pulled from our taillight area. Now, I've already gone ahead and pulled this apart as well and stripped off a little bit of the insulation on the end so it's ready when we go to wire it up to the marker light. I'm just going to set this off to the side for right now. Then I'll go ahead and replace the factory taillight. It goes on the exact same way that it came off. You'll want to repeat that same process on all four corners for taillights and for headlight areas when you go to do the wiring. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and get into the installation of the fender flare, and we're going to remove the back tire just so you guys can get a better angle to see what's going on while we do that. You will not have to remove your tire for this installation process. Okay, so here we are back on the rear wheel well. We've got two plastic push pins from the factory. Those need to come out. We're going to use a fastener removal tool and just pop those right out. Okay, now down here on the front side of the wheel well, we've got a piece of plastic trim that needs to come off. That's held on by 3 screws and then also a clip behind here. We're going to remove these 3 screws. We're going to retain 2 of them for installing the flare, and then we're going to pop the clip off. Use a 7mm to do that. Okay, now back to the rear side of the wheel well again. These 2 holes that we took the plastic push pins out of, we need to put threads back behind there. So in our kit, we're going to have some number 10 U-clips. You're going to notice we've got a flat side and the side that's not flat. The flat side has just a hole. The not flat side has threads in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide it onto the metal part of this piece back here and make sure the flat side is facing towards where your tire is. Slide that over and get that hole lined up here, and then make sure that's lined up. And what I like to do is use the number 10 hardware from your kit to center that onto that hole. Do that with both of them. So you got another U-clip and slide that in. All right, now let's go ahead and grab the flare. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and dry fit the fender flare in place. You'll notice at the front side of the fender flare, we've got some holes that the factory hardware is going to go in to secure that, and the back side is going to be held in with the hardware that we've just put in place. But we've also got 3 holes up here that actually need to be marked on the fender. If you're doing this by yourself, it's probably easiest to go ahead and dry fit this up and hold on the fender flare with the factory screws here loosely, and also our provided screws here. That way these holes are exactly where they need to be when we go to mark them. All right, now for these 3 holes, we're going to hold the fender flare in place, bring it up to the fender. I'm going to use a silver Sharpie and mark through the holes onto the fender. And we can go ahead and pull the fender back down. All right, so it's going to be a little hard to see on camera, but this is the dot right here that we made for one of the holes. What we're going to do is in our kit we've got a Mylar strip. We're going to peel the backing off of that Mylar strip to expose the adhesive. We're going to put that centered right over top of the dot and then wrap it around the lip of the fender. What that does is that protects it, because next we're going to use an S-clip. Now the S-clip is going to have threads that are right here. That needs to be going towards the inside. And we're just going to slide that over and also line that up right to where the mark was. All right, now just repeat that same step for the other 2 marks. All right, now for the wires coming from our tail light, we're going to go ahead and install our heat shrink butt connectors. So let me get that set up. All right, now let's go ahead and connect these ends to the light coming off of our fender flare. All right, so let's go ahead and connect red to red and black to black. All right, now let's go ahead and heat these up with a heat gun to shrink those down. Okay, now that we've got our wires connected, we're going to go ahead and lift the flare up to the fender. Make sure the wires are tucked inside the flare and past where we're going to be connecting any kind of hardware. What we're going to do next is we're going to line up the provided hardware for the rear and the factory hardware for the front and get that loosely installed so that we can then line up the small truss screws up at the top. All right, now for the 3 holes up at the top side, make sure they're lined up to the holes in the clip above. And then what we're going to use is these number 10 truss screws that are really short. They're 5/16 truss screw. We're going to get those lined up as well. All right, repeat the same on the next 2. All right, now that we've got all of our hardware lined up, we can go back and tighten it all down, and then also make sure you got your wires secured. Now, I'm using a Phillips head screwdriver here. If you've got a tire here, you're not going to have as much space, and if it's an oversized tire, you may have very little space. So just as a tech tip, it can be helpful to use just a Phillips head bit going in place and then turning it with a closed-end wrench, a box-end wrench that is 1/4 inch. All right, now we are at the front wheel well. Now, I've already gone ahead and removed the front tire. You do not need to do that. Again, we're just doing that so you guys get a better angle on what's going on up here. Next, what we're going to do is remove 7 of the factory fasteners using a 7mm. We're going to go here, all the way up along, including this one, but we're not going to be removing this one. Make sure you retain those because we'll be putting some of those back in to reinstall. Okay, I went ahead and got everything wired up to our headlight housing the same way I showed you on the tail light. Next, I want to go ahead and turn your attention to these 4 factory locations where we just recently pulled out some hardware. That's going to be where we're going to mount our bracket for our flare. You'll notice that these 4 holes will line up to the 4 factory holes. Before we use our factory hardware to mount that, make sure you look at these previously installed U-clips. You want to make sure that they are over top and centered over their respective holes because we're going to be putting hardware through that, and if it's not centered, it's going to be a lot more difficult. So now we're just going to take the factory hardware and mount this up in place to the fender. I like to get all of the hardware started before I tighten anything down. Also let you know this bracket is not side specific, so it's the same bracket for the driver's side and passenger side, so you don't have to worry about getting those mixed up. Let's go ahead and use our 7mm to tighten this down. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and dry fit our flare into place. And once we get it set in place, one thing you'll notice is that all of these holes line up to locations for fasteners except for this one right here. So we need to put a fastener on this location. So what we're going to do is get that nice and lined up down here. Then take our marker, mark that location and pull this down. Now we can put a fastener right here. Okay, so this is our mark right here. What we're going to do is take one of our foam pieces out of our kit, and we're going to peel off the adhesive backing. And we're going to set that nice and centered on top. And then we're going to wrap it around the other side. Now, right where it's centered, we're going to take one of our long U-clips. The flat side needs to be facing to the inside. The other side has the threads on there. And now what we're going to do is slide that into place right here. And now we can mount our flare. Okay, I went ahead and connected our marker light to our extension wire just like I did on the rear flare. Now we're going to go ahead and line this up. Make sure you tuck that wire into the flare as you're lining everything up. And for the back, we're going to use 2 of the factory fasteners. We're going to get those started. And for the front, we'll use 1 factory fastener and get that started. While you're putting this stuff together, make sure that you are not going through any of your wires. Now for the rest of our fastener locations, we're going to use the provided number 10 truss screws and get those started as well. We've got 4 of them that we're going to do. Okay, now that we've got all the hardware lined up, let's go ahead and tighten it all down. 7mm with the factory hardware and a Phillips head with the provided hardware. Now we can also use the provided trim tool to seat the trim and also keep it from curling underneath itself. Do that on all 4 flares. Now just repeat the same process on the opposite side, and that concludes the installation.